Yeah.
All right. So here we are, ladies and gentlemen, episode 1 or 2. I'm not sure which one's going to go first, so we'll see. But I'm here with Chris Bravata, and we are going to talk again today about his research and just some of the other stuff that's been going on in the IML, kind of how he got there and his story going through, similar to how we did about Brian. So, yeah, we're going to jump right in. Chris, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, buddy?
Yeah, so I am Christopher Bravata, but no one ever says my full name because that's just a mouthful. So I often go by Crispy. I am born and raised in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, which is just the neighboring suburb over from Milwaukee. So I'm a local person, diehard, love this city, love this community, and it is one of the reasons why I love being part of the IML. It's a local thing and lets me, in a way, give back to the Milwaukee community because I'm surrounded by people here in Milwaukee.
For sure.
In high school, in middle school, I kind of got off of this really crazy tech craze, courtesy of my middle school STEM courses. And it was just a downhole rabbit from there, and I was just obsessed with video games. I probably spent more time playing Minecraft than any of my homework in 6th through 12th grade combined. I do not regret that.
I hear that, man.
Capacity.
I hear you there. Seriously.
Yeah. And that definitely was just a downward spiral that just kind of plummeted me right into this whole like digital stuff. And then once I decided to take more of an artistic twist in my stuff, then I was like starting to really understand like communication and how that plays into things and how absolutely fascinating things like that can also be. Like how certain minute little differences can completely change someone's interaction or emotive understandings of like just simple things. It's partly why platforms like Apple have such a successful stronghold in the U.S. markets because they do such a good job of crafting those emotional and interactive experiences to work much for themselves.
Sure. So do you know, would you say you had like a specific thing that like really kind of sets you in motion towards doing what you're doing? Like if you could like pinpoint it?
If I could pinpoint it, I would have to say it was the death of my uncle, as dark as it sounds.
Wow. Yeah. Sorry.
My Uncle Jeff. I know, rest in peace.
My condolences,
Rest in peace,
yeah.
Jeff. Yeah. My Uncle Jeff was somebody who always saw the creative side of me, especially in situations where maybe I wasn't as open-minded. I often have a close-minded path, and I'll often just kind of zone in on one concept and leave it at that.
Sure.
But my Uncle Jeff always saw that I had a creative side to my practice, even though I never took an art class since 6th grade. Never one in middle school. And I think I took one like the end of my senior year just to satisfy a requirement. But I never really decided to go back into the art scheme since elementary school. I just 100% right in on the technology. And he was like, you should look into the technology part. Like that is the part that you should like look at, like the design side of it. Like there is so much here that I think you'd be fascinated with. And I didn't listen to him. I hate that I didn't listen to him. I didn't listen to him. I was just like, yeah, it's cool and all, but I just kind of brushed it off. But it wasn't until he passed away and I got to go to his funeral over out in Long Island, New York, and just being able to be with my aunt, who was also very much art-centric as they both were. And then that was kind of the moment that really kind of kicked it. Was just like, you know what, design really kind of is this something that maybe I should look into.
For sure.
He never shut up about it, ever, whenever I was talking with anything about it. So I just went on a whim. I was like, you know what? Screw computer science. I'm not going to do computer science. I'm going to do design communications and stuff. And that was the genesis of this whole thing. It was when I really kind of shifted from just how to code things to really understanding how does this encode meaning rather than just interactions on a computer. Like how do these things create nonverbal things? Like how does it work with the mind? How does it work with your everything? It's really fascinating.
How is it all encompassing? How does it all work? Like you said, work together. It's surface value. You're like digging into what you're actually researching and hoping for more like internal gratification. It sounds like, to me at least. I don't know, and especially from where it comes from.
Yes and no.
Sure. Okay.
Like I'm not looking at it just to like look at it and be like, oh, that's cool and find the inner meaning. I'm not like some I'm not like my English high school teachers that were just trying to find meaning in sometimes where there was none. And this is kind of channeling my high school energies, and being in the STEM programs, is putting more of a scientific take on art,
Okay.
on design, which is why I chose design, is because it is a language. It is the one universal language that connects us all.
For sure.
It is not English. It is not Spanish. It is not Dutch or German. There is only one language that we all really truly speak from the moment we're born to the moment we die, and that is just the visual communication of emotion,
Okay.
as expressed through
Yeah.
words in our own native dialects, through glyphs and characters, through even just colors. It's these things of simple affordances in life and being able to understand how those constitute a bigger image. That's what I'm chasing after. Is trying to understand those aspects of like communication. Like why, how does this make this possible? How does seeing this symbol justify this understanding? How does seeing this color mean that? Why does it mean
Okay.
that?
All right.
How can we make small adjustments
Sure.
to mean that?
Sure.
Et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, that's some crazy stuff. That see, and you said yes and no, and I think I don't know if you see it as much as I do, but I think that you are leaning a little bit more yes than you are really giving yourself credit for, because that's a whole interconnectivity that's present with all human beings, and like that's a pretty like it's internal because of just everybody it has similar shared experiences, especially through this platform and like through this this means. Like art is like one thing that people can all see. Like I mean, if they can see, not to get morbid,
yeah,
but go ahead.
It's not morbid. Some people have disabilities like that, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's no bad thing. But that's the beauty of design, is because design is not innately limited to one
Exactly.
medium. You have auditory design that look at like the leitmotifs utilized in some of cinema's greatest soundtracks. I'm a personal fan of Ludwig Göransson's work. As he does it. I butchered that name so bad. But he's done work for Black Panther. He's done work for Creed 1, Creed 2. The Mandalorian, as everyone probably has known. You know, his work in that, and Tenet, astounding work. And the amount of innate detail that he puts into it. Even though it's just auditory enjoyment for our ears, and it sets the tone, and it sets the mood, and it kind of has this edgy style, there's reasons why you like in Mandalorian, there's different instruments used for different effects, because those instruments themselves have messages or associations or annotations that connect to other things. It's that deeper embedded meaning with it.
Absolutely.
Like, it's not just limited to the visual arts.
For sure.
And it's not like I'm trying to chase after like the true meaning of life or something like that, which is the impossible question.
Absolutely.
That we always must chase after. But I'm kind of like dancing around the sun. I'm just trying to. I'm blanking here. Wow. Oh yeah. I'm gonna make a code reference here, but I'm trying to understand the source code or the binary of humans. Like, why can somebody in like Tokyo, Japan, look at a particular sign that, let's just say, does not have any glyphs of either Japanese, English, or any other language for that matter, if there's like someone that we share understanding of. It is purely just visual communication in a uniform method. How is it that that person can see that, understand that, without ever having like a crash course how to understand design? Like you have elementary school where you're taught English, you're taught the letters, how to pronounce them, how to write them, and then you spend the next 6 or 7 years learning how to write cohesive sentences and paragraphs, and to the point which where you're in high school you can write whole papers, be it terrible ones that are done 30 minutes before they're due and like the night before. You know how it goes.
Absolutely.
But our native dialects, they're things that we're taught. But visual design is like this core innate understanding that's deep within us, which is it's fascinating, as I've said like 5 times already.
Yeah.
It's like, how do we have this universal understanding before we can even understand our own language that we're taught from our parents and our peers and our teachers?
Wow. Yeah, no, I mean, as far as, yeah, dude, you're, I love talking to you guys. You guys, I've always considered myself at least a decently smart person, but when start talking with people in the lab, I'm like, damn.
Yeah, right.
Oh my god,
It's
I
crazy.
just love hearing the way like people like think about things and their like the perspective that they have, because people have so many different perspectives on so many different things that there's no way I could ever analyze all of them like from my own perspective. You know, like I could never understand them. So when people
Yeah,
can break
yeah.
it down for me and like tell me like, hey, how you look at the world and how you see things, dope. This is how I do it. Like, you know, so I think that's really cool, and I think that's a really interesting opportunity that I have to be able to talk to people in this format, like conversationally, but still like we're getting to something. And speaking of getting to something, we should probably get this train rolling. So I'm gonna first. What do
Ah,
you
yes.
use to create like digital platforms wise?
What do I use to create? I probably spend, if you look at my computer screen time, I probably spend way too much time in Adobe Illustrator. Because again, bottom line, I'm someone who kind of enjoys branding and stuff like that. I'm learning Rhino right now in one of my DFD class.
Rhino. You want to
And
explain that real quick?
that's pretty. Rhino is just a 3D modeling
Okay,
software.
cool.
So like AutoCAD,
Sure.
not like a. I only remember Autodesk Inventor from high school, but I don't really like that as much. But Rhino, it's making sense.
Okay.
So I'm learning a 3D modeling software that's gonna kind of pair with my workflow of Adobe Illustrator, so that I can kind of create anything. Because one of my, and it's a very odd pastime, but I like to create my own environments. I will theorize or fantasize and create my own spaces. And that's like relaxing for me. Like I'll design a logo and I'll design a whole brand identity and signage and stuff and imagine an environment for it.
Oh wow, that's
And I get
cool.
lost in that fantasy. I know it's kind of crazy. I have not found someone else who thinks like that.
Well, it's
I
like
swear.
people
If
paint
someone-
like landscapes and stuff. People create loads of different stuff, you know. So I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
think
yeah.
about Bob Ross. What did he paint? He painted only like landscapes and stuff on his shows. That
Exactly,
like, so yeah,
exactly.
it makes sense. It doesn't matter what you create if you
Yeah.
like creating it. Go nuts.
I mean, in my own ways, it just seems to manifest in its own kind of weird facet. But again,
Sure.
we're all human. We're all unique.
Yeah,
we're all
absolutely.
different, and that's what makes us. That's what makes us special.
For sure.
So yeah, I've got those things. I want to branch out to some other things. I suck at analog creation. I say that both subjectively as well as a little bit of objectively. If you put my drawings that I did in my drawing one class up to some other people, clearly I was not the best. I tried my best.
Dude, drawing's
but,
hard. Drawing is so hard. Okay, so so now that I have a bit of an understanding about what you do, I use Illustrator a lot too, so I get that. That's like my home base, I would say. It's Illustrator first, and then Photoshop, and I mostly Adobe stuff. I don't do any 3D modeling, which is probably
I still can't remember
safe.
how Photoshop works.
Dude, Photoshop is there's
Yeah.
so much stuff that I think that I'm good at Illustrator. In the grand scheme, I probably don't know. Like I probably know like
Oh,
a
yeah.
16th of what you can actually do in Illustrator. So
Oh, precisely. I mean, it's like that, where you have like 20% of the actual program where you actually use it for the entire time.
Yeah.
And then there's like 80% of the stuff you may touch once in the whole year. And some people that just becomes daunting, and I guess that might be the case with me in Photoshop. It might also be because I just prefer vector content.
yes, me
because it's
too.
Infinitely scalable.
Me too. I totally agree with that. I think it's crazy that you can go from the size of a postage stamp to the size of a bus, and just like that.
That's
you
so
know?
cool, right?
Yeah, super cool.
It makes me think, and this is also something that maybe I want to explore later on as a member here at the Immersive Media Lab, is I want to understand or at least explore the potential of vectorized photography. Because I want to I feel
Wow.
like vector is the future.
Wow,
of
dude, that's
digital
mind
content
blowing.
saving. I know, and I toy around with that idea so much.
Dude, I never even thought
I'm just
about
trying to-
that. That's,
I know, because it's just a pixel
Yeah,
graph of
wow,
every color, and
that's
when you blow it up, then
nuts.
it's just that. But I think right now, with the emergence of LiDAR, which is basically kind of like sonar, but pocket size in like a phone, like the iPhone 11s and the 12s have it.
Okay.
Are we on the iPhone 12, or is it
I
still?
have no idea,
I've
dude.
lost track. I've
I have
lost
a
track at this point.
Samsung. Doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, right. But it's like you have all these different mediums, and especially with VR and AR, where we're creating three-dimensional environments and we're translating the real world into there. I feel like we're gonna. I mean, we will obviously reach some kind of Ready Player One tier stuff with VR and AR. But at the same time, I also think we could also use some of those technologies that we used for that to really make some breakthroughs in vectorized photography. Because if we can make that breakthrough, gone is the whole concept of megapixels. Because
Seriously.
vectorized photography literally just is a like it's so hard to explain. It's like a representation.
Yeah,
of an
well, what would
of
you
in a room.
see if you pulled if you pulled the vectorized photograph into Illustrator and zoomed in 6400? Like, what would you see? You wouldn't. Would you see
Like,
a bunch
that's
of?
what I'm wondering.
Yeah, that
Like it almost is paradoxical.
It-
Like, can you zoom in into like the microbial form? Is it like just a depth
Whoa,
map
dude,
of
that's crazy.
colors?
So I
so
feel like
cool to think
just
that.
real quick. So for those of you listening who don't know what vectors are, normal pictures are made up of pixels. And pixels are just little pieces of color, basically, that build together to
Yeah,
make this
pixels
picture.
are a square block of
Yes,
color.
exactly.
Monitors, they're it's basically just a giant graph, but they're so small. It's like imagine an Excel spreadsheet with each cell filled in with a color, but they're so small you can't see it.
Yeah.
But all the graphics drawn on your computer are pretty much drawn with that.
Yes, exactly. And vectors are based on mathematical equations. So shapes completely generated off of mathematical equations. From what
Exactly. So it's
So it's infinitely scalable. So
Yeah.
like I said before, you could take an image made out of vectors the size of a postage stamp and blow it up to be the size of a bus just based off of exponential growth. Like you could multiply it by however much
Exactly.
and there it is. It's that big. So
or even consider this. Vectorized displays. No longer need a pixel
dude.
graph to display information on the screen.
we need to figure out a couple of things before vectorized displays is probably
I think so, but I think at the same time it might be possible. Now, this
Wow,
is just me theorizing
man.
these
Oh
stupid
my
ideas.
god.
But
I've never
consider-
thought about that. That is insane.
yeah, but consider it maybe as like a gel-like substance that exists within your screen, like a liquid crystal display, LCD.
Yeah.
But instead of having individual lights that change color based on certain things, it's this gel that has many different layers or something like that, and they can, based on electrical currents in certain directions on the perimeter of the screen, it can pull the gel in very strict and precise methods to draw shapes in a vector map. That's just me. Just
No,
a
I
really
know.
wild idea that just popped in my head right
Well, it
there.
also kind of feels like it reminds me of like you talking about that gel reminds me of like maybe they could control it like ferrofluid or something. I don't know
That's what I'm
yeah,
thinking.
okay, all right. Well, we drew a parallel there then. All right.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So
And how you can like move it and stuff.
we could go on. We could go on. Obviously, we could go
We
on.
could
about
easily
this.
go on
But
for days.
speaking of things you'd be interested in researching, how did you find your way into the lab? Because obviously that's where you're doing your research now. So how did you find yourself in the Immersive Media Lab?
That is an interesting story, but it's kind of weird because I feel like it's not 100% my story to tell. As you may know, because you're obviously within our community
Yep.
here, this is my first semester with the Immersive Media Lab, so I'm fresh off the cheese block here. Got to make those Wisconsin
Yes,
references.
sir.
I'm fresh off the block, brand new to this, and it's from what because I mean, to be all honest, my entry to the Immersive Media Lab was pretty much just an email from Chris W. After last semester ended, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to be a part of this?" It literally was just like, do you have the time for this? Are you interested? Yes, no. It was a really brief, really short email. And he was one of a few professors who was asking me to take an additional class. And I was like pondering, should I do 18 credits this semester? Should I? Should I not? Is it really worth it? But then he sent up a follow-up email later afterwards. And this is being in the context of a pandemic. We, being home and not having many interactions with people, I really kind of felt alone.
Yeah.
and in a way, there's actually a good quote that I pulled up. This is more of a little glimpse of my personal life, but they always say people think that being alone makes you lonely. However, being surrounded by the wrong people is the loneliest thing in the world.
Ooh, deep,
Right? And even
deep.
though I know that like opens up many windows and many doors. It's worth considering this is that there's a certain bliss that you get from being alone, but in the middle of a pandemic where you cannot be with people physically.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously certain exceptions and limitations are permitted, but for the most part, you really can't have that same social life that maybe I came to college to get here, right?
Yeah,
I felt
definitely.
really alone because the few friends that I did make, the pandemic really reveals which friends are real friends, and which ones are not.
Oh yeah, fair
And it
weather.
revealed a lot of things for me. So I felt alone. I felt pretty lonely because I didn't
Understandable.
really find the right friends, and I needed a community to be part of. And that was one of the things that Chris W. put out in that email. He was like, you can be a part of a community here. And I was like, I need a community to be a part of. I need someone to kind of connect with, to be able to kind of resonate and kind of share that same energy. And I knew from my previous classes that he really does a good job of cultivating that. And I'm gonna try to not like worship him
Oh yeah,
in ways here, but
dude.
I do want to give adequate credit to where it's due. But we talked a ton about theory, and I asked a lot of questions, and it seemed like Chris saw that in me, so I guess he offered that email in doing so for me, I guess here. So it was a duality of us, as me seeing that there is a place for this to happen, and him seeing that within me, and then extending that offer so that I could join this, to which I eventually accepted because here I am on this podcast.
Okay, so now we're gonna switch on and actually start focusing on your research a little bit. If you could title your research, what would you call it? What are you trying to get at?
It's fluid. I'll be honest, but right now my working title is Understanding and Establishing User Conventions and Interaction Models in XR. And XR is referring to VR and AR and pretty much that whole realm of things.
Okay, say that to me.
That makes sense.
Tell me the title of that like I'm 6 years old.
Like you're 6 years old or 5, because 5 is my favorite number. Okay.
Yeah, 5,
So,
fine.
Understanding and establishing user conventions and interaction models. I'm trying to understand how user conventions and interaction models work. And I'm also trying to, with this previous knowledge, establish, or I mean, obviously they're kind of some established, but to a certain degree, come up with a set of guidelines for how interaction models and user conventions should exist in the realm of virtual reality so that it's accessible and understandable by everyone.
Okay.
Now you're probably asking, what is user conventions and
Exactly.
interaction models? Exactly.
Read my mind.
I'm leading you on here.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not going to drop you off, I promise. So user conventions are your habitual interactions with computers, at least in this context here. So like,
I.e.
for
your
example,
phone and everything too?
yeah,
Okay.
with any interaction
Okay,
with technology,
gotcha.
you have there's interaction models which are curated interaction experiences between you and your phone that are engineered, they are designed so that you see certain things, feel certain things, and so forth. These more passive forms of interaction models can be seen in film. How they are curated scenes for you to watch, for you to see, for you to feel with the music and stuff around you, which forces you to feel certain emotions as you see certain scenes in the film and as characters develop and so forth.
Okay.
More actively, there's certain things like maybe if you're on the sneakers app from Nike and you're trying to get a shoe, and they're going to show you different graphics on there as you're like waiting in line or trying to get the shoe drop. And the focus of it is to kind of hype you up, to get you excited for it. That is an engineered interaction model on a platform.
Sure.
In that case.
Okay.
Going far as user conventions go, that is the habits that we develop as people when we interact with technology. And that's the part that I'm focusing on right now in this kind of semester-long realm of things. Is I'm doing a critical eye look at how when humans first kind of when computers first started really kind of proliferating in the market in kind of the 90s and the early 2000s, right when the iPhone just came out, right when Apple had the Macintosh 1 and 2, when those were starting to kind of come into homes and we had home computing for the first time ever.
Yeah.
How did we learn to interact with these devices that only say 0101000111010? Like how do we learn that?
Sure.
So there's different aspects of these things that justify these habits that we create. Like, for example, if you, I mean, you have a Samsung, so I'm not sure if this is the same case.
Well, I am on a
But I
Mac
know
though, so
you are on a
I
Mac.
am on a
Well,
Mac.
Mac is, yeah. So everyone's got a mouse and a trackpad, right? Everyone knows when you move your mouse around, you see that little pointer arrow, and that is your cursor, and that is your interaction or your point of touch
Yeah.
on a desktop display, right?
Yep.
You know that is a user convention that we have all understood and established among our entire community. Like, if you just give that to a computer, not a computer. Wow, Terminator vibes. No, you give it to a person. You give it to a person, and then if they obviously have technology experience, they will know that means that's your mouse. They know that pressing these buttons on the keyboard with the letters on it means it's going to press that key, or it's going to press that letter and input it into it like a typewriter or something like that. That's why, like, the keyboard still uses the QWERTY format, which was established back in the typewriter days, because we learned how to type with that structure. Everyone
Yeah,
has
it's
it memorized.
understandable
I
to
learned
people.
exactly, and we learn these conventions. I mean, certain things like the keyboard stuff, you're taught that in high school or in elementary. I was taught in third grade. I don't know about you or anyone else, or if someone just used typingtest.com or something. Who knows? But everyone learns in different ways, but you all learn the same thing. But there's certain aspects of it that you just kind of become innate to. For example, swipe to unlock on the iPhone. This is the best example of an established user convention. When iOS 1 through 6 was on the market, it had a very skeuomorphic design style. And I'll get to that later, what that means and why that's important. But just note that it looked real. It looked like real objects from the real world tucked behind a glass screen. And when you were on your phone, you turned it on, the screen came to life, and you swiped that little bar. Like, how did you know to swipe that? How did you know that this little object, you could touch it and you could pull it over and it would unlock your phone?
Because what else are you going to do?
Well, I mean, obviously there is kind of that what else.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, how do you tell somebody without giving them an instruction manual, this is how you unlock your phone?
The arrow.
An arrow is a good example. What else?
Well, it said swipe to unlock right on it. So.
Okay, but swipe what? Swipe what?
Oh, yeah, I
It said
guess.
swipe to unlock, but how does it tell you that this object,
Is what you're
the little
supposed to
gray kind
swipe.
of arrow-shaped block,
Huh.
how did you know that was the one that you were supposed to move?
I guess process of elimination. What else would, like I said before, what else would you swipe? So
Okay, so
maybe I'm just missing
this is a
something.
smaller
but-
little detail that kind of goes into this, but this kind of shows why these small little interactions really help this. If and I'll see if I can pull up a video on YouTube that you can link in the show notes here that kind of shows that.
For sure.
But there, the little arrow bubble, it would jiggle. I don't want to say like jiggle around, but like it would kind of look like it was bouncing on the side, trying to
Okay.
say like, "Hey, I'm movable." It indicated movability because it moved. And when people see things that move, you know, they tend to move things. Like, you're not gonna touch a rock, and you're not gonna expect to move a rock because the rock doesn't move, right? But if you see like what's a good example of something that just kind of moves, like a door handle. Maybe you saw the door handle move from beforehand, so you know that is an interactable object. The shape of it implies motion. It implies interaction. And this whole concept of implied motion is known as an affordance, right? They, like, door handles are a great one because they imply, at least in most cases, rotational interaction. You see a little door handle, and then you grab it, and you rotate it around the axis of where it's attached to, or you twist the knob, or your sink, you twist the handle.
Sure.
Like, the design of the shape implies what you're supposed to do with it, and that was why skeuomorphism, which is a system, or at least in the context here, a design style or aesthetic that strongly associates to what things were, or physical real-world objects in this case. Why it was so successful, because they designed the software and all the objects to look like real-world objects, so you knew what you were supposed to do with
For
it.
sure.
Because if you didn't have a button that looked like a real-world button, no one would know. Like, imagine dropping iOS 7 when the first iPhone came out, and how big of a flop that probably would be, because no one would know how to use
Sure.
it at all.
Okay. So yeah, once people got comfortable with the interface, it allowed them to go into more sleeker and like visually appealing designs for the badges of their apps and everything. Like I know that's not exactly what you're getting at, but like that's kind of like the familiarization with how things worked led them to be able to do what they do now. Like familiarizing
this
their
kind of
users.
goes. Yeah, so this kind of goes back to the actual definition of skeuomorphism, and I'm using this word for a double meaning here, so I will explain both. But I'm going to go with first the definition of the word skeuomorphism, which is a form of ornament or ornamental design, which can be shown due to originally to the original nature of the material and the method of working it, or to its technique. The forms and patterns of it originate in a certain technique that may be further modified or copied from another material. That dictionary does not do the best description of it, and it probably confused you, as it probably did confuse me.
It probably confused a bunch of people.
It basically is it makes interface objects, or in this case, anything, because skeuomorphism is a concept that can apply to everything. It makes objects familiar to the people who use them by using concepts and predisposed interactions established from days prior, years prior, built upon
all right.
compounding knowledge.
Sure. So it's like, since you know, like, the going back to the door thing, you look at the handle and the way that it's shaped suggests that you're supposed to turn it.
Exactly.
And you know that because you've seen other doorknobs shaped that way your entire life.
And
that's just what you've been exposed to.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And you understand how latches work.
All right. I got you. I got you.
And even more, here's like a non-interactive model of skeuomorphism, which is a great example because we're gonna take a little history trip here, like to the Greeks. They used concrete for not real concrete, like stone construction over kind of wood-based construction in some cases. And I'm saying this like not 100% really through my Greek unit in art history, so I could be very much wrong about this, but I'm gonna hope that I'm on the right path.
At least you take
this is my
responsibility for it.
Yeah, and yeah. So beforehand, construction was done with kind of wood and sometimes stone, which resulted in what's known as post and lintel construction. You have two posts, and you have a beam that kind of sits atop it as a lintel. I don't know why they call it a lintel, but it's a thing that sits atop of it, and it usually is not flush with the side of the post. It kind of sticks out. You see them in pictures of like mine shafts and stuff. You know how they kind of like hold above your head. In other cases, they're load-bearing construction. Obviously, today in modern construction, you don't really need to do post and lintel construction because everything is so precise and there's so many more advanced ways of bearing weight so that things can stand tall and firm. But back in the day, the visual style of these things implied their safety of it. Like, if you had too much weight on it, you could see that visually through the buckling of the wood, through the buckling of the columns.
Sure.
Because they only could hold so much. Technology was not that advanced back then. So when it came time that they adapted and they started new forms of construction like the Greeks did, they had these concrete structures, which obviously can bear more weight than wood. And in itself, they also bear weight differently. They distribute the weight in a different pattern, meaning that they don't need as many columns here and there to hold certain things up.
Sure.
And this actually caused a lot of people in that time to be worried about certain buildings because they didn't look secure, because the only secure constructions they saw were like post and lintel construction from the days prior.
Okay.
So how did the Greek combat this? They did ornate little details along the edges of their buildings that created fake lintels, implying stronger structure within the building than it really was. Whereas it was just completely ornamental. It never actually did anything physically.
That's so bizarre.
But because it looked that way, people thought it was stronger, and they felt more safe being inside those buildings.
But when really they weren't any safer or less safe than...
Yeah, adding it or it being there or not being there did not actually change the security of the building itself. It was purely ornamental. Wow. But to the people who saw it, they interpreted it as more structurally sound.
Wow. Why not just make it stronger, I guess,
I mean, the limitations of the technology
Sure.
at the time.
Okay. Yeah, that makes
I mean,
sense.
people interpreted the building. The building was strong enough to hold it up that way. That's why it was built.
Yeah, they were just worried that it wasn't.
But they were only used to buildings with more columns and a different style because that was the limitations of the medium before.
Sure.
When they upgraded that, they didn't know that that was even possible. Because I mean, again, early technology ages, they didn't know. None of that was known to any of those people.
Sure.
So it's kind of cool seeing how those things then, and those concepts are still even elevated through the realm of design even to today in technology, which is where I'm looking at it.
Mm-hmm. And how exactly are you looking at it with what you were just discussing in mind? Can you draw any parallels off the bat, or is that just kind of like a broad spectrum thing?
What do you mean by that? Could you elaborate on that?
Like you're talking about, putting those lentils, the ornamental lentils there in the middle, just to kind of give people this peace of mind, even though there was nothing for them to worry about in their in the construction of this this building in the first place. Like, how do you connect that ideology to what you're working on in the lab?
Okay, so obviously there's that concept of skeuomorphism, which is the implementation of ornamental design or aspects to imply its figure, its form, or its usage, or something like that. Like obviously we saw in the post and lintel example, it was to imply a stronger building. You know, in digital technology ages today, or I mean, like even the doors. I'm jumping ahead of myself here. Doors, door handles, they imply rotational usage. Buttons, they imply push it like on an elevator,
yep.
right? Everyone goes in an elevator, you know exactly what they do with a button, you push it.
Yeah.
Like, now in the realm of design, where you have, a VR headset on your head, and you have two wands in your hands, how do you do stuff? It feels more like a PlayStation controller or an Xbox controller broken in half and you just have one in each hand and that's how you play. Is that the most ideal form of interaction? Or is that just our skeuomorphic adaptation for the medium? How can we advance that? How can we truly unleash ourselves from the reins of our history moving forward?
All right. No, I feel you there. Like you said, yeah, when you breaking the controller in half, because I've used the Rift S a couple, or not the Rift S. I've used the Quest 2 a couple of times, and the Quest 1 actually.
Yeah.
But I've used the Quest 2 more than anything else because my buddy has one. But yeah, when you say it's like a controller just broken in half, you're totally right. Like you're completely right. I mean, I play enough Xbox to know what it's like to hold a controller. So if you were to bust it in half, same exact thing. So that's what people are comfortable with. So you're interested in seeing how we can break those chains of people being comfortable with this to further unlock potential to be more immersed in these XR platforms. Is that what you're kind of getting at?
Yes, and
of course,
also
yeah.
it's obviously. So yes, I wanted to see if there's certain ways where we can unleash ourselves from the reins of the past.
Sure.
But I don't want to explore that in a callous way. Because obviously, as I've said before, interaction with everything is built on these affordances, which is the implication of that medium, which is how skeuomorphism comes to be, right? It is how we convey these affordances. Like, do we have to use an Xbox controller to convey these affordances of interaction? Is there a different way? Or is there some other unknown technology that we have yet to discover that will enable new forms of affordances and new forms of interaction behavior that further unleash the limitations of VR and AR, which obviously there's the technological and cost side of the medium.
Yeah,
like
for
it costs
sure.
like $300, $400, $500 for a VR headset. And there's obviously a lot more computational stuff that goes into AR. Even though it's much easier, you don't need to hold a headset onto it. There's a lot more onboard processing that goes with AR rather than VR, because it has to inlay to the real world rather than just create a whole new fantasy of it itself, right? So it's understanding how those interact with each other, and then how can we understand, like, does this really help us, or is this holding us back? Oh, it's holding us back? Okay, then maybe we don't need to use that. what can actually take its place that people innately understand using that universal language of design that we all have, so that there is less of a learning barrier for anyone who wants to get into VR and AR, because it is obviously the future, at least from what I see, obviously the future of how we're going to be interacting with technology going forward.
Sure.
But at the same time, I highly doubt that we're going to be having Ready Player One kind of type stuff where, yes, let me just go home to my living room and spend 5 hours in a VR headset.
Yeah, right.
I highly doubt that that's really going to be the reality that we're going to live. Like, it's a nice fantasy. It's a great, great book, great movie. But I doubt that as the actual future that we hold. And I feel like it's hard to predict the future that we hold because we don't have a concrete understanding of these affordances, of these interaction models that we need to know so that we can really build for the future.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I hear you. We're just not, like, it's basically what you're saying is we're just not there yet. And there's a lot more that needs to happen before before we can get there. And I was just thinking, breaking the ties from, like, that the whole handheld familiarity of the half and half controllers, like, I bet you someday they'll have, you stick wireless patches on, like, different parts of your hands and it'll pick up the musculature movements within your hands and then transfer, broadcast those into your, like, Rift or your Oculus or whatever VR headset you're wearing. So, like, but how's that going to happen? Like, there's, like you said, there's a lot that needs to happen. So it's interesting because that would further, I think, I mean, if I'm looking at this correctly, having the ability to use your hands in that and, like, actually, like, point at something and, like, pick something up even if it's not actually there, like, that would make it way more, like, in-depth, like, so much easier. Like, you'd feel a lot more connected to what you were doing within the actual headset, whatever's going on in that virtual reality. So yeah, that'd be nuts.
Like how do you know you're picking up something in VR? You said you used the Quest 2.
Yeah,
and that's
you
the one that
literally
I'm using
like
to
you
work
click
with.
a button for the most part.
You click a button, but outside of the button, how do you know you're holding something? Like if you're in, like, the First Steps demo game, and you're in that level where you can kind of play with the toy blocks and the paper airplanes and stuff, how do you know you're actually holding one of those besides just you pressing on the button? Like,
well,
obviously in real life,
I
know I'm holding my phone because I feel the weight of it. I feel its mass and I can move its mass around. Obviously, you can't move the mass of a digital object. I mean, obviously not including concepts like the holodeck from Star Trek, but we're not going to go there for right now. Like, how do you know you're holding?
I guess
one of those
maybe
things?
just because you can see it. Maybe just because you can see it, but that's and I don't know. I don't know exactly. Besides being able to, like, visually see it and, like, know that you're pressing the button, that's the only thing that I could think of about how you know you were holding something.
Exactly. You don't. I mean, there could be some haptic feedback where it vibrates when you grab something, but does that really imply
sure.
that you're holding something? Or is that, because at the same time, what is something that shakes and squirms in your hand when you pick it up? Your neighbor's cat.
A bug? Oh, yeah, or a cat, yeah.
Yeah, like things like that. Like, it implies that it's living, which is obviously not what it is. So there's other realms of technology that we have to explore, and I think that they're going to be defined by these interaction models. Like, how do you create mass out of something? Maybe we need to create a variable weight-based construct, I say, like a liquid or a gas or something like that can change itself and its density so that you can feel weight in your hands.
Oh, that would be something.
Maybe like if let's say you're playing like Call of Duty in VR, and when you pick up a gun, the controllers actually have a variable mass-based technology inside that when you grab the gun, you actually feel the mass of the gun, so it feels more real.
That would be nuts. I mean, like, I feel like even early versions of that would be like the whatever you're using in your hands, say you're still using the controller type things, are like hooked up to like resistance bands on pulleys, and like every time you're about to hit something that has weight and lift that up, those pulleys wind up real tight, so then when you're lifting it up, you can actually feel resistance of it, and then like as soon as you let go of that button or whatever, those pulleys release, and then there's no more pressure on them, so it feels like you're moving them around.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
That's what I'm thinking about. Like in my first week or second week of research, when I was able to get my hands on the Quest 2 for realsies, I was taking a hyper concentrated look at the Guardian system that comes with it, which is how it tells you you've reached the end of your barrier.
Yeah, that's cool.
If you go any further, you're gonna hit your TV on accident. Thank God I didn't do that. But how does it tell you that? Like, it creates this barrier wall with these plus signs that get bigger when you get close to it. But then when you get too close to it, like your hand passes through a circle that it creates around
on that grid. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, is that the only way of implying that you reach the edge, is a visual way? Should there be a secondary form of, like, warning system? Like, should you be able to feel it? Should you hear something? How do you determine what breaks those barriers? How to indicate that you're reaching those barriers? And how do you do that without either A, becoming immersive within your environment, like if you're in a video game? How do you do that in-game? And create that a universal system that can be skinned to the interactions? Or how do you create a universal safety system that doesn't matter what platform, but everyone knows you've reached the end of your barrier, go any further, and your PS5 is toast?
Yeah.
Like, how do you create those kind of things?
I mean, your guess is as good as mine at that point. I think the grid and the little plus signs in the circle, I think that works pretty well, in all honesty. So, I mean,
it does work.
The idea that maybe an auditory thing could work as well, but I feel like that may or may not take away from the experience. Exactly, yeah. And I mean, as much as that visual cue that you're reaching the end breaks the immersion anyway, it's way better than slamming into your closet wall. Like, I got a buddy, or a video of my buddy playing Super Hot on the Quest, and he punches the closet door super hard, and it's hilarious. So
yeah. So, and that's the other thing. It's just like, it's this frictionless environment that exists within. Like, it feels like my physics class all over again.
It's bountiful too. It's like you can look in VR. You can look for miles. You can look at something that's 6 miles away, and you're in a space that's 8 by 8.
Exactly.
You know, so.
Yeah, like I have my
Hence the
home base
immersion,
in the Quest 2. Exactly. I have it set up as the space station theme because I'm a space nerd. I'm a big Star Trek junkie. Live long and prosper, obviously. But like, that is one of the cool things of VR, is it transports you to another world in your own environment. But at the same time, there's also this dissonance, this tactile dissonance between that transported world that your body is seeing and you're interacting with it. Like, in itself, you don't feel 100% immersed because not all your senses are adding up. Your brain's like, I see, like, let's just say you're like watching a 360 view of New York City. I see Times Square. I hear Times Square. I feel my living room carpet. Something's wrong.
Yeah, what?
Or like I don't feel this taxi car that just went
Yeah,
past
the
me.
wind isn't there.
I don't feel this.
Oh, that's so
The wind
bizarre.
isn't there. Or maybe I put my hand out. My arm should be broken now, but it's not. Like things like that. Like, how do you wrap around those remaining senses that are still not immersed?
Oh my
like
God.
VR, you got your sight, you got your sound, you got sometimes your tactile interaction, but not always. How do you bring the other senses into that immersion? Because once we can reach that point, we'll be like doing some holodeck type stuff from like Star Trek Next Generation, and that's gonna be where this stuff really jumps off.
Yeah, that's pretty insane. I mean, kind of drawing a parallel back to Ready Player One again, like, they did a good job explaining the whole haptic thing with the suit that he wears. He wears that suit that he can feel the touch of other people through. So, I mean, like, maybe something like that, but still, I mean, there's just so much that goes into that. Like, you look at how far VR has come even in the past couple of years, and you're like, wow, like, this is insane. Like, people building environments that people could literally get lost in, like dream worlds. But then you think about how much further it has to go, and it's just like, oh my goodness. And so, like, that's kind of where I can see your research like heading. And I was wondering at first, how you were going to connect it all to the XR platforms and everything, and the more and more you explained it, the more and more I was like, okay, like now I start to understand.
Because I mean, I'm not there
Obviously,
yet. I guarantee you, I'm not there. I'm not at the VR XR stuff yet. But that's the part as I'm getting to. I think if I really can get to that end point, is my goal is to maybe establish or create a clear set of interaction-based rules. I don't want to say, okay, rules are not the best word for this here. Guidelines that highlight why this is a good idea, why that's a bad idea, why we should go with the good idea, not the bad idea, and whatnot. And then on top of that, it'd be fun if I really have time for this. Is to create a kind of simulation-like experience, and I think I'll do this probably with AR because it's probably easier. Just in terms of the overall creation side.
Yeah, for sure.
But because like you've seen Iron Man, right? You know the whole Jarvis stuff and how Jarvis is just like this blue orb and he kind of shows up before he turns into Vision. You know, like in Iron Man 2 or in Iron Man 3, where he's like creating the orb thing that powers his chest.
Yeah, his arc reactor,
right?
The miniature arc reactor.
Yes, the arc reactor. It's been a while since I've seen Iron Man 2, so. Or 3. I don't remember which one it is. It's been that long. But, you know, like, he creates this thing and you got, like, Jarvis up on the wall and he's, like, doing things with his hand. Like, he's blowing out this giant holographic thing. Like, what interactions should be a click? Do we still need to use the click for, like, that? Like, is that how we're doing it? Is the click now a standard human interaction? Or is that still just a bridge from old computing when we had mice and keyboards? You know, like how do we know like we're grabbing something? How do we know that we're not grabbing something? How fine of a precision model can we get? Because that's another thing as I am looking at is precision models and how like different types of interaction on computers determine your interaction with certain like things. Like you have a mouse and keyboard, and that's why most people prefer mouse and keyboards, at least playing video games, because you have really fine precision. You have your mouse, you can move it very little, you can move really far. You have your keys, you can just tap the W to go forward, the S to go back. You can hold shift for as long as you need to crouch, space bar to jump. You know, you have this really fine level of precision. But then when you get to game consoles, that's not always the same. You have your triggers, which kind of, you know, kind of flop around.
No.
You don't have as much precision with those triggers because it's either just shoot or not. Again, that's also the same thing as like a click on a mouse here.
Yeah.
But like you have your joysticks. You don't have as much range of motion, right? And because there's not as much range of motion, at least rotation. I mean, yes, you technically could get down to the degree of rotation, but your thumb really only has so much precision in itself. A mouse, you can just twitch it over, and you can move it ever so slightly, like you're like having much more precision, like a sniper or something. But your joysticks are a far less precise form of interaction than a mouse and keyboard. And then going even further in that spectrum, you have touch on your phones and on your keyboards, which is why almost no one plays video games on their phones and keyboards besides Pokemon Go or something like that. Like, imagine really trying to actually do good at Fortnite on like your iPad or something or on your iPhone. It's not possible because you don't have that precision.
Yeah, even if somebody's cracked on an iPad, if you're on a console, you'll smoke them, and it's not even a question if somebody was on PC. It's not. Yeah. It's not even.
Yeah. It's because that precision model is not there. It is the least precise medium, but at the same time, it is the easiest way for us to understand how computing works. Like you just touch it. It's the simplest form of communication. You just touch.
So basically, what you're saying is, grand scheme of things, you're trying to find a way to make it easier for us, or for people in general, to experience things in VR, like in a more natural way that would allow them to perform to a better potential than where we currently are with what we currently have. Is that a pretty good way of saying it?
Yeah. It's fine. It's fine those things, and it's also is understanding. Like beside. Well, no, I'm getting lost in my own words here. Wow, I'm wonderful at that. I do that often. So yes, it is finding those ways of how we interact with things, and I'm looking at history because history is obviously the greatest teacher in life, and history dictates how certain things work and how patterns work. And obviously, you've known the quote, "If you don't know better, history will repeat itself." For better or
Yeah.
for worse. And in some cases here, we want history to repeat itself because these are good principles and we want them to appear over and over. There's also other aspects that sometimes don't show up. And we want to avoid those things because we don't want relapses. Like, obviously, like, we want to learn from history so we never have bad things like World War I or World War II from ever happening again. You got to learn. You got to look at that. So right now, again, I'm looking at history. I'm trying to understand how different things worked in the past for computing. How we went from not using computers at all to using computers to then using touch-based computers and how that's evolved.
For sure.
And I'm gonna look at that how we can like a prediction, like a forecast. I'm using history to determine a pretty good prediction model for the future.
Okay.
That's kind of what I'm doing.
Awesome.
I dance around a bush saying that. Wow, that's wonderful of me.
No, man.
But-
Hey, honestly, you just super interesting basis that you're working off of. I didn't have the mental capacity. Well, I mean, maybe I did, but I didn't have it in myself when I was first reading about your research and stuff, and like listening to what you were saying in the breakout groups to like fully understand it. So I was really excited to get you on here and to talk to you about this. And believe it or not, dude, it's already been an hour that we've been talking. And I knew I was like setting.
Wow, that's crazy.
I know I had the timer going and everything, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna let it ride because I didn't want to stop you because you were making some great points and drawing great parallels and great conversation. I'm super glad that we got to do this. I'm like really interested in what you're gonna be coming up with and like just the research that you're going to be doing and the hopeful discoveries that you'll be able to make and you know, if this is your first year in the lab, man, you got some good ones in the future, I can tell. And I'm super stoked about what you're doing, and I'm super stoked that you took the time out to come out, or not really come out,
problem.
but you know, get on the show and chit chat with me. So thanks a lot.
I can't wait
seriously.
for when we can have in-person stuff, you know?
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
man. Absolutely. I said
Yeah.
the same thing to Brian. So, yeah, man, I think this is where we are going to, we're going to end it. So, thanks a lot for
Sheesh.
being here and explaining
problem,
your
no
stuff, man. Yeah.
Glad I could share.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Take care. We will see you next time.